Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to join you all today to kick off a conversation that's as timely as it's necessary, right? How life sciences can unlock more value through global capability centers or GCCs and smart partnerships, right? Let's face it, leaders in this industry are juggling more than ever, right? Accelerating innovation, optimizing costs, embracing AI, and maybe trying to still catch some sleep in all the process, right? It is a shifting landscape. Sourcing strategies are evolving really fast. GCCs are no longer just offshore entities or back offices. They are becoming centers of excellence, packed with domain depth, tech talent, and strategic intent. At the same time, service providers and third-party organizations continue to deliver what they do best, right? Flexibility, scale, specialized capability, almost acting like a reliable Swiss Army knife, if you could say, for enterprises to navigate through complex transformation, right? What often ends up getting missed, though, is a forum where both sides of the story come together. And that's what makes today's conversation both exciting and special. Right? We will explore not just where organizations choose to build versus buy, but also how they sort of orchestrate the best of both models and align to business outcomes and also being ready for an AI first world. Right. So let's dive in because getting the sourcing right today might just be the best prescription for staying competitive tomorrow. And I'm indeed joined by eminent leaders along with me, right? So really, really grateful for the panel that we have today. We'll talk a bit about what's happened in the last 6 to 12 months. We'll talk a bit more on current trends, and then we'll open it up for Q&A as we progress, right? As we move on to the next slide, wanted to start the conversation with some of the persistent pharma themes that we've been hearing in the market, right? Right from areas like platform consolidation to autonomous workflows, the evolving role of GCCs, safety and compliance. Let me also take this opportunity to invite my colleague Manu Agarwal. Manu, I know you've been hearing a lot of this, especially directly from the enterprises. Curious to hear your opening comments on where we see the industry.
Thanks, Bharat. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think now more than ever, right? All of us are living in just more volatile times, right? If you are operating in the US, we already know everything that's happening with the drug price regime, with the tariffs. If you're operating in European markets, we know what's happening with the rollout of the MDR. We know what's the whole GDPR compliance issue. So there's just a lot more for an average farmer to chew through. So which means that there are some hard decisions that each and every one of us needs to make. And alongside comes the whole question around, okay, where am I going to be investing in terms of my capability centers? Where am I going to be getting my next best technology coverages come from? So it's just a lot more volatile time where each and every one of us needs to do a lot more with the small budget pools that we all have. So just more volatility in the industry. That is all I can say.
Absolutely, Manu. Suman, Aditi, inviting you as well. Any early reactions, thoughts on all that we're hearing from the market?
I can go first. My sense is we are in very exciting times in life sciences because when we trace back the history of the GCCs, life sciences probably are a little more nascent than the other industries, so to speak. So I guess we are just growing, and we still haven't probably will take a lot of time before we truly explore the extent that we can go as far as GCCs are concerned for life sciences. So very exciting times, and it's a complex industry, so a lot of great problems to solve.
Yeah, I do give kudos to a lot of the pharma companies who have taken the step to establish their GCCs, especially in India, and they are really looking at creating value rather than just a cost play, really focusing on the value and what they bring for patients. and how they create value for their headquarters and patients. So real kudos to them. There are plenty of them that are expanding with their presence in India, in different cities, and scaling innovation. So we'll talk more about that.
Okay, thanks, Aditi. So if I go to the next slide, then let's look at how some of the big pharmas, even some medtechs are kind of responding to some of these industry trends, right? So it's no surprise, right, that if you look at what's happening in the industry, all of us have to make some tough choices. And in fact, one of the tough choices is actually on the R&D budgets. Unfortunately, that's the place where the farmers would want to cut the money last. But given everything that's been happening in the recent past, given some of the hard choices, that's also the area that's probably seeing more volatility than others. So alongside what's happening is basically the farmers are having to make tough choices on what therapies they want to offer. Do they want to continue to focus on some of their core therapy areas versus go into some of those high risk therapy trials and all, which they always wanted to invest towards. And unfortunately, in some places, they just had to scale back. But the good thing is, alongside, they're also starting to invest in more M&A activities. They're starting to buy more late-stage novel drug portfolios just to kind of bolster their R&D engines. So it helps that you have those kind of cash pools which you have saved by cutting down on some of the moonshot projects. But at the same time, you need to be very selective about what drugs and therapies you get into. And then comes a point around, okay, where am I going to be investing in my GCCs, my capabilities? So it's now more than ever, right? You need more functional depth. You need more domain depth. You need better talent retention policies. And a lot of that stuff is what exactly GCCs kind of empower as you think about the next evolution of the farmers. And lastly, obviously, no surprises, right? AI and generative AI kind of capabilities. Every organization today wants access to the best of breed capabilities. We're already seeing the farmers investing heavily in a lot of these capabilities and looking at how can they utilize it, where can they monetize those capabilities, how can it make it either more leaner, more efficient, or it can just overall increase the efficacy of whether it's their R&D programs or whether it's their compliance part of the journey or just taking the drugs out to the industry. So if you really look at farmers are juggling a lot of these things, but they're actually doing really well. So in a way, all of this volatility has also given us an opportunity to really rethink the core basics principles of the industry and think about how do we do work differently in an environment like we have today. So with that, let me do this, right? Let me invite our audience in. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that there's a poll that we wanted everybody to kind of participate in. So we'd love to get your reactions. The question here is, if you really think about the next frontier of value creation in your global operations of pharma, where do you think, what areas are going to be the most important? Is it analytics and AI? Is it the global regional delivery models, talent strategy, vendor consolidation? Which of these are most important to you? And in the meantime, I'm going to invite our panelist, someone, Aditi. How do you see this evolving, right? What are the big priorities that you are seeing in the pharma industry?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a focus on new therapies, to treatment of rare diseases. Innovation is very key. And at the same time, managing cost is extremely key. And then if you think about how AI and advanced analytics can impact all of these areas, that becomes very exciting. That is where a lot of firms are now looking at how do I bring in AI in the full value chain of pharma to bring in efficiencies, to create more innovation, to drive speed of innovation and bringing therapies in the market. So I think there is a lot of potential there in transforming the pharma value chain.
Suman, from your perspective? Suman, you're on mute.
Excuse me. And I'll complement what Dr. Aditi says. I think one of the things we need to, or at least has become clear to me over the last several years, is that when you look at the life sciences industry, there are three important givens, which I think there was a question in the box as well, is what is unique to us. One is that there is a lot of IP sensitivity. It's also a long-term play out. It's like 10 years to develop a drug and get it to market with a lot of money spent on it. And third, you need deep domain expertise. So when you look at these givens, then obviously the basic, the objectives don't change. I mean, to try and get a meaningful drug which can serve patients in the least possible time or as quickly as possible, right? So that is really what we are still trying to. And advanced analytics and AI and other tools that will come down the road are things to make that better. But ultimately, it's all to serve patients by getting a drug to cure diseases which either don't have a treatment today or have a treatment, but we can do better.
Thanks, Suman. And I think the our audience agrees with you as well, right? So advanced analytics and AI clearly more than half the priority. But then we also see prevalence of delivery models and strategy. All of these are starting to take prime focus. So, so with that, let's do this, right? So we at Everest Group, we also do surveys across majority of our industry participants. We interview with big farmers, mid-size. We interview a lot of GCCs, a lot of service providers. So let's take a look at what are some of the big trends that we are seeing, which are starting to shape the life sciences market as we kind of know it. So if I move to the next slide, there are 5 key convictions that we firmly believe is going to shape how the industry is going to evolve this year. And this is coming directly from the horse's mouth. So vendor consolidation, I know a lot of people did not choose it as number one priority, but when we talk to the enterprises, a lot of them are still on that vendor consolidation journeys. They're preferring more single integrated partner kind of approach. And more often than not, what we see is that's the way that they see a lot of the technology and operations value creation, the breakdown of that silos. That's what's going to happen. This is also probably one of the reasons why they're investing more heavily in GCCs, because GCCs allows you to cut through those silos in some shape and form, more so than what even a vendor can do. But I think that's one of the key priorities that we see the enterprise kind of moving towards. The second one is we talked about the therapy specific R&D investments, but we didn't talk about therapy specific outsourcing. We are starting to see a lot more service providers, whether it's technology companies, services companies, are all coming up with more therapy-specific capabilities. And throughout the drug development lifecycle, it can be as early as early stage molecule detection, dry labs, wet labs, and takes it all the way to post-release, to pharmacovigilance, to post-release drug and consumerization of the drugs. All of those areas, and we're starting to see deep therapy-focused capabilities being developed in the third-party ecosystem. And then obviously we talked about the GCC model. I'm going to invite Bharat also in a minute to talk more about this one. And then how do you get more ROI out of AI, right? We just talked about AI. So the biggest question right now is how do you really extract value out of AI investments? Is it going to be those big data projects that we did during the cloud era where we're going to migrate everything? Or do you use it in a more smarter fashion where you identify a use case, be it PV or clinical or quality, and then use AI to drive those use cases and the outcomes? And finally, and probably the biggest question of the year, which model do I choose? Is it the full functional service provider? Is the FSP model versus do I go like a full service outsourcing? Do I really want to work with a more full stack CRO, which bring me best of breed and the end of end kind of solutions? Versus do I go with more functional capabilities and get those more point solutions capabilities and make it a more interesting combination between my various service providers? So again, but I know you look at this space, right? Let me invite you in, and especially if you can help us enlighten more about the GCC model adoption. What's really driving it, right? What are the key factors which are leading to this growth in the GCC side?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Manu, and thanks for setting this up, right? I want to build on a very important point Suman just mentioned, right? It's ultimately about getting drugs faster to patients, right? And that's where any sort of lever that pharma enterprises can pull the right direction is going to be beneficial, right? When we look at the in-house side of business, if we can move to the next page, we are seeing an increasing endorsement to the GCC model, right? In some ways, when I look at it, especially in context of locations like India, we probably had a fourth wave of evolution, as I would like to call it. First one was way back in 2000, early 2000s, where some of these organizations set up, and it was mostly for cost arbitrage. And we saw the early 2010s, where we also saw some bit of selective focus on technology, maybe also getting a leg into areas like biostatistics or clinical trials, specific value chain centric area. right? Around COVID or pre-COVID, it's where we saw a lot of tech coming in more intentionally. Now in this next wave, we are actually seeing even end-to-end becoming a prominent part of the GCC model, right? Particularly if I were to talk about locations like India, we've seen the talent pool in the GCC market, right? I'm excluding the third parties and CROs. Just the in-house GCCs has almost tripled in the last 6 to 8 years, right? We are seeing organizations that are intentionally building capabilities across the value chain. The intent is not to specialize in one function, but rather build even cross-functional capabilities, right? How can a tech and a supply chain, for example, come together to build a AI-based tool for a freight logistics and planning that can help improve efficiencies, reduce losses in transportation, right? And tech is becoming a cornerstone of how this whole transformation is moving. Next, we've seen examples of GCCs even open second sites or strengthen capabilities just to house high-end technology capabilities, right? Just to put some of these in numbers, if we move to the next page, right? We are estimating, and slightly dated estimates, but we're estimating about 65,000 odd people as of now who are working across the globe in the in-house model, right? This would include GCCs of quite a few global organizations such as the likes of an AstraZeneca, Eli Lilly, GSK, Novartis, Novo Nordisk, and more, right? Of this 60,000 odd resources, about 40% of that is in India, right? Similar 40% in Europe, Middle East, Africa, mostly Europe, Central Eastern Europe. Also now seeing locations like Spain and Portugal starting to get a lot of interest in this space. And then of course the other parts of Asia Pacific like Philippines, Malaysia also continue to house teams, and in Latin America for especially for US support we are seeing locations being leveraged, right? What's interesting though is a couple of points. One, India continues to grow faster. So if I were to do a similar slide a year or two from now, I won't be surprised if the share of population in India crosses 50%, right, from a global portfolio standpoint. The other interesting point is the wide value chain coverage, right? As I mentioned earlier, this is not limited to one or two functions, but rather across the entire value chain that's being covered. And on that note, again, if we move to the next page, we've tried to bring in the whole pharma value chain into one slide. I know it's hard, but sort of covered this to a fair extent, right? From areas like drug discovery to clinical trials, manufacturing, supply chain, post-launch activities, commercial operations, and some of the horizontals like patient safety, quality, regulatory, medical affairs. We are seeing GCCs today have a presence in across all of these areas, right? And in some cases, GCCs are thriving, right, with more than 50%, 60% of global headcount sitting in locations like India, Poland, Ireland, and so on, right? And these are also including areas that involve regulatory submissions or supporting global leaders in scientific communications and so on and so forth, right? What's interesting and promising to note here is the foundation that's built. This is only going to further get better. In fact, we are already hearing GCCs ask us questions around orchestrating, let's say, something like a wet lab capability, right? How can GCCs run parts of quality testing or batch testing or even molecular formulations and do analytical modeling and analysis in the same breath, the same entity, right? Those are the kind of next level questions also that we are hearing from the market, right? Net, where I want to leave the whole conversation building on the earlier themes that we put is, I know talking a lot on GCCs, but I want to pivot this a bit more to democratization of talent and capabilities, right? And also the model maturity, right? Both for global audience to understand and extract leverage from offshore centers, also for offshore centers to be able to understand the global context, to understand different stakeholders involved in the whole equation and being able to support, right? So Manu, that's what I would sum up this whole point around GCCs and the broader implication for the ecosystem.
Thank you, Bharat. So I know you've heard from me and Bharat enough, but let's get to the meat of the discussion today. You can have a lot of interactions with Everest Group, but we really wanted to put the spotlight on our guest speakers today, Suman and Aditi. So if I move to the next slide, let's get the discussion going. So the first theme, and rightly fitting, this was the highest voted answer on our poll. So let's talk a little bit more about AI. So the two big questions, Suman, Aditi, I'm going to pose to you, right? So when you think about AI, right? All of us want to avoid the mistakes that happened at the advent of Gen AI, right? In the first year, we had hundreds, if not thousands, of pilots and POCs. 95% of those never saw the day of light. So when you think about taking these pilots to production, right, what are the right use cases, right? How do you identify the right use cases? What do you do to make sure that the AI scales? And second, how do you really measure the value and success behind some of these AI initiatives? And if you allow me, I'll probably throw in a third question which just came on our chat as we were speaking. One of the panelists, one of the our audience has asked, how do you hire the AI talent, right? Do we have sufficient AI talent available today in the industry to be able to kind of take this to the market? So, Suman, Aditya, I'm going to invite you in. What are your thoughts on the whole AI and innovation journey in life sciences?
That's a lot in one question, but maybe I'll start the first, take the shot on the first one. Look, we all have discussed AI at length, and we can. I think one thing is true that it's not the question of adapting to AI; it's the question of how fast, right? It's very clear that agentic AI or generative AI, whatever you take, they're going to reduce a lot of the low demand or low end work or repetitive knowledge work. That's already happening. They'll also create a lot of hybrid roles where you'll probably have a conglomeration of science plus prompt engineering plus quality operations, right? It will also change the kind of skill sets you need, which is why one of the challenges would be that when repetitive knowledge goes off, you will need to reskill those people. Otherwise, you'll have to let them go. That remains a big challenge on that front. But most of that, as you said, Manu, will depend on use cases. And because this is an industry which is life sciences, and there's a huge regulatory oversight, everything that will be done will be deliberate and kind of thought through pretty well. I'll stop here and let Dr. Aditi comment.
I echo your point of view there. Well, I mean, it's like you said, it's a matter of time that AI is going to be, coming into different phases of drug development and release in the market. And when I look at the life cycle of drug discovery, clinical trial, biomedical literature research, precision medicine, personalized treatment, supply chain manufacturing, regulatory compliance, and launch. I think AI can impact in so many different areas. But if you look at some of the high impact areas, right, today, it would be clinical trials, because that is a very expensive phase of the drug development. There's a lot that AI could do in terms of the data, the impact on data and analytics, and as well as on the biomedical research that AI can help with, and understanding the competitive landscape and the intelligence. So just for AI to be successful and more than from pilot to production, it's important that high value use cases are identified, which aligns with the strategy and the business strategy and the regulatory compliance aspect. So for example, if you take clinical trials, that it's important that certain use cases are taken to align with clinical trials and the regulatory compliance of it. It's important to get the executive sponsorship, the long-term buy-in, because like you said, the drug development life cycles are long. So you need longer, sponsorship and long-term commitment to have this AI play out and show the results. Definitely need good data for AI to be successful. In production, we need structured data, unstructured data, high quality data set for these AI models to be trained in and to be successful. We also need cross-functional teams. We talked about talent. We definitely need experts in life sciences as well as very good AI engineers and data scientists who can come together and create AI models which are relevant to the industry. And then the companies need to invest in AI infrastructure, cloud-based infrastructure, AI, different AI models, and all of that. And then also this needs to be focused on ethical AI, making sure the models are not hallucinating, and making sure that all of these come together to create an AI model and use case which can be deployed in production. So I think these things are really important to fall in place step by step for AI to be successful in production. Otherwise, it just stays in the pilot phase. So for example, if we look at clinical trials, right, there could be potentially areas in clinical trials such as AI-driven patient recruitment, where electronic health record, genomic profiles, and clinical notes can be quickly assessed by AI to to do patient recruitment. Then protocol optimization could also be enabled by AI. Adaptive trial design, AI, predictive analytics, adaptive analytics can be brought in to do that, to do real-time adjustments in trial design. AI can also be used to predict risk assessment and compliance as the trials are running. So definitely there's so many applications of AI to enable clinical trials, the more success of clinical trial, avoid some of the risk and increase the, reduce the time of clinical trial, improve the efficiency of the clinical trial, and cost reduction of clinical trial, regulatory compliance accuracy of these trials, trial acceleration, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a good area for applying to clinical trial. That was just one application that I wanted to kind of talk about. There are so many others that we could definitely be focusing on. Yeah. Over to you, Manu.
And
Thank
if
you.
I may add, Manu, we talk a lot about success cases. I've also seen failures. I mean, one clear failure was when we had an AI chatbot, which was targeted with HCP engagement in one of the big farmers, and there was not enough context, in terms of contextualizing the problem. And the HCPs were not very impressed because the language translation came in place, right? So those are things which need to be thought through before you go out and to the market and try and test some of this. So again, there is a distinction between where are you using AI? Is it to sort of disrupt something internal, or is it to disrupt something external? I would be very careful on the latter.
Fair enough. So this is an interesting point, right? So if I summarize, what we're talking about here is obviously it starts with business value creation, but you can't just jump into every use case willy-nilly.
Yeah.
You have to define, right? Where is my technology ready? Where do I have enough domain and context so that the hallucination problem, the AI chatbot problem you just talked about, someone that doesn't happen. The technology itself needs to be mature enough to be able to handle it, and then the whole data readiness aspect of it. So, but one thing I did not see any of you talking about is this is not going to be at like an enterprise level AI journey kind of a thing. It's going to be about, hey, use cases, business value creation starts from that lens, move backwards to figure out how can you power the AI use cases. That's interesting.
One of the things that I see some GCCs moving to now who are a little more mature is that they are not leaving this decision on AI with a particular business area. So let's assume that it's IT. So IT does not get the primacy because they want the business to be involved. So now they are co-locating some kind of a COE structure who are actually adjudicating on what kind of AI problem would be addressed, right, in priority, because at the end of the day, you have a finite amount of dollars. You can't also keep on, throwing dollars at moonshots, right? So it's like exactly the process that you go through when you're deciding on a drug candidate, right? There is a process that you decide which will take priority and which will sort of, we will put to the shelf. So that process is now starting to, because the opportunities are so many, but you still have to narrow down on what's more effective or what's more urgent for you.
Yeah, And if I may just add one point, right? Thanks, Mr. Manmohan. And this is also in line with one of the questions that we received around tech and talent as well. Right? The absolute value again is only going to be as strong as people who are going to be able to interpret, apply, and act on it. Right? Tech is a great tool, but it's not going to be in silo drive transformation. Not a single bullet. Capability can. Right? That's why probably building the right internal talent and partnering for right specialized skill sets when needed is going to be very creative, very critical. Right? It's the ecosystem again, where tools, talent, even trust for that matter, and all that comes together, it's going to be critical.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, we will just move into the next theme, right? Theme 2, we can bring that up. Want to go a little more intentional around how organizations are leveraging GCCs and partners ecosystem to drive innovation at scale, right? And we've got the right leaders for it. Suman, you've been there, you've run GCCs, obviously you've helped a lot of organizations create extract value from the third party relationships. Is that the secret sauce? Are we seeing certain areas where GCCs might get end up being better suited, some areas where service providers get better suited, and all of this is coming at a time where we're looking at locations like India as talent first versus necessarily cost first. Right? So maybe Suman, I'll open it up with you. How do you see this whole build versus buy equation shifting?
Well, again, as I said in the beginning, IP's sensitivity is very high in this industry, right? And you don't get too many chances at sort of correcting yourself, especially if it's at the front end of the business. So you build where IP is an important factor. It can become a competitive moat, or regulatory excellence is absolutely essential, and you just won't get a chance to sort of, you generally don't get a chance to correct that one. High level of compliance is required there, right? So those are things you typically build. And the trends that we're seeing is things like on data sciences, on AI and ML, which are uncertain in terms of the output or the outcome, are being increasingly built. And what is being bought is where you see a vendor having a clear advantage, where they already have a platform, where they have scale, where they have flexibility, and it sort of gives you the flexibility to sort of outsource that part of the business, which you probably don't need to own. So I think those distinctions are very clear. There's not too much of a difference, but I do think that the AI disruption of the creativity and will continue to be the build part of our life sciences business going forward.
Got it. And Aditi, how do you see this?
Line with what someone is saying, but I also think that the GSIs are investing a lot in AI, as you know, in generative AI, in agentic AI, and they're building a lot of good AI platforms. They're investing. So a lot of the GCCs are very interested in AI talent that GSIs are bringing in, and accelerators like platforms or unique IPs that have been created that can accelerate their projects, in the GCCs. So there's definitely a partnership there. I think that they are ready to leverage the talent from the GSIs there, and bring in some of the accelerators inside of GCCs built by GSIs to accelerate their projects. So I think there's a definite collaboration there in the relationship. So I do see that. And I do see that in the IT and shared services area, there is definitely more presence of where bringing in the GSI capabilities is more desirable because it's not too core, like someone said, like it's regulatory or a drug discovery and other areas, whereas in pharmacovigilance or some of the safety areas, it's more built.
Got it. Just curious, right? With again going back to our question on AI and some of the questions that we received from our business as well. Um, as we look at this in the future, I mean, will we start seeing newer models also? For example, we are in a state where the conversation of GCC versus service providers are moved from competition. Right, to a large extent, it is trending towards more collaboration to see where both can come together. Um, just curious, how do you see that part of the equation? Maybe I'm jumping into this theme a bit early, but given the interest in building on the momentum, right? How do you see that also?
I always saw a lot. I see a lot of collaboration. Honestly, I mean, I thought that I see the GCCs are very open to learning what the GSIs have to offer. If there is a digital patient engagement platform or there is some type of a solution in, say, driving cost efficiency or AI based solution, they're always very interested to look at it, explore it, partner in that space. So tremendous amount of collaboration, even forming centers of excellence where there's a collaboration to bring in talent, do hackathons, develop a list, create a list of ideas and try to work on it together. I mean, I always saw a lot of collaboration because it's a race to get, like you said, create patient outcomes, bringing new drugs to market, new ideas to market, and I think the GSIs definitely can help in doing that, and also help the GCCs create more value faster, and bring that to the headquarters, not just to the market, but also to the headquarters. It's definitely collaboration, I feel. Over to you, Sumit.
Absolutely. I mean, look, the GCCs, when they started off, there was a bit of, okay, we can do this in-house, right? We can also hire talent and we can do this in-house. So they had to prove themselves. So you saw a lot of things where you see that in the industry too, there's a lot of partial overlap of both things being done, and which is okay. But this collaboration, as Dr. Aditi says, will always stay. And in fact, I think it will only grow. On the partner side, what we would like to see, obviously, are they're looking at sort of things like managed services, especially IP-led platforms, right? And also, I feel that there will be a strong co-ownership of GCC mandates, because not all GCCs would be able to afford the scale, or it doesn't make sense when you think strategically and putting on the shareholders hat. Why would you do something inside when you don't need to really have a need to own it, and somebody else can probably give you a better solution? So all these decisions will be done, obviously not probably at GCCs or maybe the headquarters where they're managed from, which is why there has to be a strategic, shell separate from taking these kind of decisions. But I think it will be much more partnership and collaboration going forward. And also, I believe that in the race to build great AI platforms, I think our partners would be second to none. In fact, in many areas, they might be actually ahead because they're seeing the industry as a whole in terms of and not just one workspace, right? So the kind of knowledge explosion or knowledge creation that you can have is much better when you co-opt them instead of compete with them per se.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's also the onus is on the partners to invest in domain capabilities, building domain capabilities. It's just not a technology play, so it's important that the partners invest in building regulatory capabilities, clinical trial capabilities, and pharmacovigilance and drug development capabilities to be able to bring more value to the GCC, not just the tech, but the tech plus the domain. So, yeah.
Just one, if I can put it as a provocation, right? And someone, Aditi, being practitioners, would love to hear your view. Are we also implying that in the future, the crux of these relationships will be anchored on outcomes versus who is necessarily going to be at the front of it. Meaning, could there be scenarios where a GCC could orchestrate a relationship with, let's say, a startup or a third party to deliver certain outcomes versus what we are necessarily seeing, like an enterprise procurement-led sort of a function. So, meaning, will we also see a scenario where this gets a bit more the best place to get the outcomes versus necessarily a preferred shore or a source to go after?
Yeah, my sense is it will play out the way you are articulating it. If there's no great need or reason to own from a IP and a competition standpoint, my sense is the work will go outside because I'm pretty confident that our partners will develop that kind of an IP, protective environment because cybersecurity and all the other things are going to be very important too, right? I mean, a cybersecurity incident and a certain important aspect can cost somebody billions of dollars, both from a,
Yeah.
from a brand standpoint. So given those, as the confidence grows in the ecosystem, my sense is there'd be a more rigorous assessment of do we need to own it. Because what we don't know at this stage is that today we think that this is an absolute need to own, but the technology might be such that you probably say, you know what, I really don't need to own it. We have enough safeguards and firewalls are better off putting our resources. Because at the end of the day, it's where do you co-locate your resources to reduce the time to decision factor, right?
Yeah, I agree with what someone just said. I think it's the IP protection, and that is going to be very key. And then it's all about speed to market. Yeah, and building the domain capabilities. I think that is a very big area of focus for GSIs or CROs or tech partners, building domain capabilities if they have to compete with the GCCs, because the GCCs focus on that quite a bit. Yeah.
Fair enough.
I just
So
I just believe you'll have a huge competitive intelligence building up, industry intelligence building up in this space. Nobody wants to get left behind.
Yes.
absolutely. So we've heard from a panelist. I think it's time to also hear back from our audience. So if I can request our moderator to bring up the next poll. So you heard our point of view on the GCCs and the third-party models. Here's a poll for the audience. Let us know, what are you hearing in the market, right? To what extent do you see there's overlaps in the model, there's separate models? What are the things that you feel this model will likely evolve towards? Right. And Suman, Aditi, I know you already kind of talked about this one a little bit, but any additional reactions when you see some of the options in there, right? There's a few different approaches to kind of adopt. What have you seen happening in the pharma world, right? When do organizations choose to go with a more hybrid model or an overlapping model versus when do they prefer to keep these two models separate? Is there a particular reason or to kind of do this versus is it more as the pharma organizations evolve or the therapies evolve, they just decided on the go?
My sense it's probably more on the go. And when you have a confidence in the work that you're doing or what you're planning to give out, again, the whole thing is a trust-based system, right? Once you develop some kind of a an intricate confidence, it happens. And I think it's a process. It's just you have to go through just some of the failure modes till you get to that particular level, I guess.
Okay, let's see what our audience also said. So okay, so vast majority, more than half the people agree that there are overlaps, but then there are also some unique advantages. There are certain capabilities. I think both Aditi and Suman you mentioned, right? Third-party service providers, they have probably the wider kind of accessibility and visibility into what other clients are doing, what other industries are doing. But then at the same time, GCs are more aligned towards how an organization operates and is kind of informed. so they can always be more relatable in that context. So helpful. So with that, I know we are short on time, so we're going to skip past a couple of themes, and instead what we'll do is we'll take a few of the questions because we got a lot of those both before and during this webinar. So let me take some time and kind of answer some of those questions now. So the first one I want to kind of put out to our experts, right? So one of the questions we got was, we're talking a lot about AI. The whole concept of AI is eventually this is going to become more and more autonomous. So what role do humans and especially experts in the industry will have to play when we are in a more futuristic AI-driven economies, especially in the pharma industry, which is so domain intensive? So where do you think our human model is evolving to? Where does our is a domain expertise evolving towards when we talk about an AI-enabled pharmaceutical world?
Well, we are addressing a science here. So obviously, many of these experts will be called upon to validate the outcomes of the output. I think if you look at you know some of them will probably act as a necessary bridge between maybe you know, the folks who are experts in AI or like data scientists and others, and the business and regulatory needs. I think the models will probably need to be trained as well, both in terms of when you look at, as Dr. Aditi was saying, there's a lot of work being done on clinical trials, so trial design on the pharmacovigilance side. So I think clearly there'd be a lot of domain experts who would be needed to validate across the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that human in the loop is going to be very critical. Suman, I don't think we can eliminate the human in the loop, right?
Yeah.
Especially in such critical areas of work where, you know, there's outcome related to patients that are involved here. You know, there can be a lot of repetitive manual tasks where AI can come in and help. There can be a lot of predictive analytics that AI can definitely be helping with the productivity improvement. But high value tasks where human intelligence and human oversight is necessary, that those are still domain specific, years and years of experience, right? That human in the loop is going to still be very crucial for the success of drug development, safety, regulatory compliance, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is consistent, right? Especially when you look at highly regulated markets like life sciences, you need to have some kind of a human in the loop to at least kind of do the final checks and validations. End of the day, just using AI does not kind of abdicate our responsibility. It's a tool to kind of make ourselves more nimble, more efficient. Plus, end of the day, I also see, right, we will need people who will be able to coach these AI agents at the right level. So that's the another role that a lot of our human domain experts will need to kind of play as this industry evolves.
One of the
Okay.
things I would add here is it also would depend on how fast the external ecosystem is, especially regulatory, is evolving. I mean, you'll have to probably, even if you have an AI outcome, there is a way that you'll have to pass it on for regulatory or other oversight, right? So the human factor might come in play there if the system hasn't evolved that much. So both have to go in tandem. So that's why a human in the loop will remain a factor for some time to come.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's move on to another question. So one of the questions we got was, how do you really measure the impact generated by GCCs? And especially now we're talking about an AI-enabled world, right? So it's not just going to be about productivity or cost. So how do you measure this? So actually, Bharat, since you're also looking at the space closely, let me invite you first, and then I'm going to go to Suman and Aditi to see if they have any additional responses.
Yeah,
Bharat?
thanks, Manu. This is actually an important question, right? In many ways today, the GCC model is also fairly well established. More and more organizations are coming and setting it up. Uh, it's less about testing, but more about, hey, what do I do more? How do I do better? And for some of the questions, some of the organizations that are already here, the real question is, how do I do more with less? Or with what we already have. Productivity plays an important role. Right? I have one fundamental, counter argument to the question, and then I'll also answer the question. Right? If we really talk about it as a GCC, then the question is, hey, why are you still looking at cost savings? For instance, if it's an enterprise, it has a center in Boston, it has a center in UK. You don't really go to cost assessments of those things. If we're really talking GCC, then yes, tracking is good to keep progress, but that's not really the metric or the end goal to chase, right? What we are seeing organizations increasingly do, and we've also helped some of them, is look at cost value beyond cost arbitrage. So we look at different buckets, such as one is cost savings. Then there is one around cost avoidance. This is around the type of regulatory fines or losses that would otherwise come if a GCC is not able to accelerate some of these value. And the last one is more around business impact, right? Some of it is hard to quantify, but it's not impossible, right? Like for instance, we know of a GCC where they've been able to deploy an AI-based solution that's going to help address some of the submissions that happen in preclinical stages faster using AI ML. The documentation and all of that is accelerated by a day or two. And this is the kind of process where there are almost, there's every submission a month. It typically takes about 7 weeks to process, 7 days to process in 1 month. And even if you're saving 1 day out of it, that's, about 50 days saved in a year, right? And goes back to our same theme at the start, getting drugs faster to patients. So actually look to quantify what is the value of such 1 day benefit that the GCC has been able to add, right? It's going to be tricky. It's going to be a bit subjective, but it will need some contextual effort specific to the organization to identify what are such levers beyond typical cost savings. Right? I'll take a pause. Would love to hear from Suman as well. Suman, you've been practicing on the other side. Happy to hear your reaction.
A lot has been discussed about the impact of GCs on production, on productivity, on innovation. But the part that always excited me more is something you probably would have already started seeing playing out, is the kind of talent you're developing in an organization. Talent who are cutting across multiple solutions, right? They're looking at different facets of the business sitting in one place. They're coexisting with different business at one place, which is something you don't get very easily. And my sense is, and I hope this plays out, and I think it will play out, that these are people that will ultimately go to much bigger roles in the organization just because they have this huge breadth of knowledge, right? And this is something you cannot get maybe in a country specific role. You get it here. I mean, I was a firm advocate in saying, you know what, we might actually get some of the senior executives here for a stint in GCC just to experience this and just to understand how problems can be solved, and you sort of work with almost the whole company in one place if you have all the functions represented. I feel that's, from my perspective, that's the most exciting part.
So
Yeah.
before we close this out, Dr. Aditi, I'm gonna maybe switch the questions just a little bit for you. So now when you think about the role of AI, what do you think are the new metrics that we haven't really been thinking about that you believe that the pharma industry, license industry should start talking about?
Yeah. So if you think about AI, the first part is that the training part of AI. How many people in the organizations have been trained in AI? And that's the first thing, because the upskilling of talent is the number one thing that firms should be thinking about, right? So how many people have been trained on AI? Is there an enterprise AI training program? What level of training has been offered, right? Because a company needs to become AI literate. So that's number one. How have you provided AI tools? What tools have you provided to your R&D, to your clinical trial team, to your sales and marketing team, and other teams, right? So they can do their work faster and in a more innovative way. So that's going to be critical. I also think that how you use AI in creating experience with your customer should be a metric, right? For example, in call centers, or in dealing with patients, recording adverse events, pharmacovigilance, etc. So many different areas where there is a lot of interaction and interfaces, how are you using AI to create better experiences, should definitely be a metrics, right? It's for, experience, efficiency, training, and then also how you bring in AI to create innovative therapies. That definitely should be a metric to be looked at, because I know in some of the GCCs there's a lot of great work going on with center of excellences which are creating a lot of great ideas, new ideas about AI therapies, and then they're filing patents and they're developing new ideas. So I think those also should be metrics, number of patents you're filing as to how you're using AI in creating innovation. So those would be some of the things that I would share.
Thank you, Dr. Aditi. So with that, I think we've come to the discussion, to the end of the discussion part of it. So before everybody starts leaving, so here's our final offer for everyone. So in case you are interested in kind of talking to our experts more, if you want to go get deeper insights or some of the questions that we were not able to answer today, there's a link in the chat. Yeah, you can click on it, request a complimentary session from our experts, myself, Bharat, one of our colleagues who couldn't be here today, Chunky. We'll be more than happy to schedule a 30-minute call on specific topics of your choosing. And with that, that's basically everything for today. So thank you everyone for joining. I hope it was an informative session, and we really look forward to answering all the questions that you had, which we couldn't get to today.